Well, hello again, everybody. No particular subject today, I guess. Just bollocksology, whatever. And the don't don't expect too many arm gestures. Oh, have you noticed? I've lost my watch. My watch has either been stolen or has been lost, and I'm very actually. I know it's materialistic, but I'm actually quite upset about it. The watch wasn't an expensive watch. It was an Invicta, which is a poor man's Rolex, and I think I paid €50 for it. But I loved it. I loved the watch. It was so useful. It had a totemistic quality in that it grounded me in the material world, not the material world, yeah, the analog world, by object of an old-fashioned material object, something like a wristwatch. And I just loved cleaning it and replacing the battery, and I loved the metal strap. And now it's gone. And I'm actually genuinely sad about it. And I'm kind of a little bit angry at myself for being sad about it because, well, I feel like I'm missing something without it. And, it was it wasn't expensive enough to put on insurance, and I don't know what happened to it. If it was lost or stolen. I don't know what happened. But that got really bummed me out and got me down. And I've always, I'm not a materialistic person in any way, really. Anyone who knows me, I like if I became a millionaire overnight, I'd live the same way. Everyone will tell you that about me. I'm just Mister No airs and graces. I'm not like that at all. But I did have an affection for that watch and watches in general. Like, I've never dreamt of like having this like flash lifestyle or anything like that. Other than if I had the riches, I could make the documentaries I want to make, and I could travel to see the ancient sites around the world I've always wanted to see. But other than that, I would never. I'd still be still living like this. And yeah, and I always said about one thing I would treat myself to have if I was rich is a Rolex. Just the cheapest Rolex. I've had other people show me the Rolexes over the years. Just beautifully engineered and made things. And one person let me try. A guy I used to work with let me try it on my wrist, and it did. It felt like I had the power to it, the incredible engineering that goes into those things, the just the beauty of it. You got beauty and functionality, but you've also got something that grounds you into the analog world. So that would be the only. I'll never have one, of course. I'll never get to make that kind of money. But if that would be if I ever won the lotto or something, that would be the only thing I would treat myself to. But as it stands, I don't even have a cheap watch. So yeah, I'm surprised. I'm kind of a little like I said, I'm a little angry at myself for for being this upset about it. I don't know because it had a history. It had a history, and I got so much uses out of it because it wasn't that expensive. But there you go. Anyway, yeah, there was some comments left on the video yesterday about saying that I was gloating. I gloat or smirk when people's loved ones die from the needlecraft. That's absolute bollocks. I'm not like that at all. When I see a picture of a young kid to drop dead playing camogie or soccer or basketball, I'm absolutely furious. I'm not gloating. I'm not snickering. I'm not like looking down on them. I I'm disgusted by what happened. And those people who put those words into my mouth, I don't know what your motivation for it. If you yourself are personally needlecrafted and you're trying to make out you're some kind of victim rather than someone who made a poor decision. And again, I have no problem with anyone who took that. That was their own personal business. And I feel sorry for any decent person who was duped into it or rounded up into it and coerced into it. And I also don't have a problem with people who may have said, politely, without judgment, who might have said in the early days, during the height of the brainwashing of during the Rona times, who may have said something like, "Well, go on, the needlecraft is available now. Go out and get it," and meant it in good terms, not like you better get it or else. The only ones I gloat and snicker over are the ones who wanted us locked up for not being needle crafted, the ones who wanted us not able to go to the supermarket because we weren't taking the juice, who wanted us denied of civil liberties, and worst of all, the ones who either wanted us locked up or forced. Yeah, any of that group when they drop dead, that gloated online or in public. Yeah, I'm glad to see you go. You're an awful person, and you don't deserve to be. You don't deserve to be living in the West because you were a totalitarian mindset. Like I saw, like I can remember, I think it was News Talk, a propaganda outlet here, a government propaganda intelligence agency called News Talk FM, and they interviewed people on the street, and they asked them, "Do you think it should be forced, or people should be have their lives taken away, or be locked up?" And they're like, loads of people were like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So them times, said, "Fuck them," you know. I'm not talking about like someone who meant like there was even on the model building channels, there was people who said, well, you know, they might have been making a model about, you know, building a train or something or an airplane, and they say something, well, now that the needlecraft is out there, you know, get yourself looked after so we can all be safe. You know, I didn't really have a problem with that once it wasn't done on a judgment thing. There's one guy I can remember on there. It's. I mean, this is one of the most. You know, I'm a great. You know, not being a midwit, I'm a great one for observing and recognizing patterns in front of my own eyes rather than waiting for the government press release. And there was one individual on one of the model train channels, and he builds beautiful stuff from scratch. And he said, that kind of thing. Well, you know, you know, I'm going to get it now. We should get it. Now, he was about 40 when he made that video in 2020, whatever. He looks like he's about 75 now. He hardly makes any videos and he makes nothing new. And one of his recent videos, he was reviewing something he bought online, I think it was one of these micro saws. I have a few of them. They're brilliant, from the Czech Republic, and I've had one for years. And he was saying, I don't understand why there's no engagement on my channel anymore. He goes, you know, I get I get half the view numbers I got in 2018. I get almost no comments, but I still have the same number of subscribers. Um, and that's repeated all across YouTube on what we would call normie channels. And there was one chap that used to make really beautiful videos about Irish trains, a young lad, and he just suddenly stopped about 2 years ago and hasn't been heard of since. And there's loads of comments like, "Where are you? Where are you?" And the channel is still up, and that's it. Like, he couldn't have, and if he lost his phone, or he lost it, he could still log under a different name and say, "No, I'm okay. I just lost my phone with the passwords on it." Sometimes you do see that, but he's just gone, gone. And you hope that the worst hasn't happened, but some often it's happening. So those of you who say that I gloat when your loved ones drop dead, fuck you, okay? Because I don't. I only gloat and snickers the ones who wanted to lock us up and deny our civil rights and getting what's coming to them. Now, and also, you know yourself, the ones who post that kind of stuff are often jabbed up themselves, and they're trying to get a bit of sympathy for themselves because they don't like being told they're not as clever and smart as they like to think they are. But this is the world we're in now. Like, it's been off the scale lately. The last 24 hours, if you just look at social media, the numbers of young people just in Ireland, it's shocking, shocking, and and all healthy kids as well. You know, like they play sport or are involved in things like that, and they often die in the sports fields, which is the saddest fucking thing is all these kids who actually, instead of playing video games all day, take an interest in sport. And it's just a great wickedness was done upon us. And even like someone like Trump and those kinds of people who probably know what happened, RFK, they can't let it all out at once. They can't let it all out at once. So that grand bazaar, to use that pedo Cohen Bendit from the EU. The title of his book continues on. So Another thing too, I had terrible night's sleep last night, just absolutely dreadful, and had terrible nightmares. And when I woke up this morning, I felt like someone had gone in the rounds into the ring with 15 rounds at Mike Tyson. Like I felt battered. So I mentioned on Telegram that I had a terrible night's sleep last night, but we had a really strong uh, magnetic storm in the northern in this part of the world, and we got hit with some big time northern lights, and so a friend in Scotland said she felt the same way, and that kind of thing. So there's definitely that definitely does affect sleep. But also, if you look at the spread of the northern lights because of solar activity, where in the past you might have seen them in Ireland, once every 2 or 3 years. Now they're appearing like a dozen times a year around here, and spectacular displays often. And if you look at the actual mapping of them on top of the Earth, they no longer like basically they would be like mid Norway, Iceland, mid Greenland, sort of like between Japan and Alaska, north. Well, now that donut is much wider down and it drops down into Central Europe. Now we know that the Earth's magnetic pole is moving, but is it? Because you've heard me talk a few times in the past, but not a lot for the sake of coming across as an Egypt, trying to talk about something I'm not super educated in, but still, the earth has the earth tilted. I mean, physically tilted. I'm not talking about the magnetic poles moving. I'm talking about the actual physical sphere. Has it tilted? Either two ways this can happen: the actual crustal displacement, where the crust moves around, like if you remove the skin of an orange from the orange flesh and move it like that, or the actual whole thing is tilted a little bit. Now, uh, I've been suspicious about this for a few years now, mainly because back there was a video made about 15 years ago by the Inuit in, I think it was in Canada, who said that the sun was setting in the wrong place now. This is around 2008. And now that makes sense because where you would notice the tilt first would be in the poles. You would notice the tilts first in the poles because of the suns being very low on the horizon, circling in the sky. So within sort of subpolar regions where you would have a a sunset of sorts, you would be very apparent where the sun sets and you go, hey, that's not in the right place. It would show up very immediately, especially if you were used to it and depended on it. Now there was loads of comments all over the internet on people saying the sun sets in a different place uh, that it did before. Yet the compasses and everything all work out, more or less. And also, people have go-to scopes. That's telescopes that find you type into your computer and it finds a particular star or whatever. They're working, and then you say to yourself, well, then we couldn't have tilted then, but we could have tilted because all that stuff is connected to a series of satellites belonging to the U.S. Navy, which orbit the Earth, and they're almost like tidal locked with the Earth, like the Moon is in a way. And what they do is they regulate time as we know it through electronics and stuff like that on Earth. They regulate time that way. Now these satellites, if they what they do is they have it's one they were actually when they were launched, it was one of the things that proved that Einstein's theory of relativity was true, because even though they're in space, they're actually in a different time than we are on Earth. So there's a constant element of compensation for the fact that they're literally in a different space-time reality than we are here on the planet. And that proved Einstein's theory of relativity, pretty conclusively, as did other experiments. Now, so they could just change the time on your computer. This kind of thing. If things were funny, if the sun was setting too low. Now, there's a few things, like it would explain the global warming thing, and I'll go a little bit more into that. Now, definitely this year it has been muggier and sunnier than it has been in a long time in Ireland. And the weeds that are growing outside are growing like the Amazon jungle. There's definitely more heat in the ground. And how I know there's more heat in the ground is I have an electric shower, a Triton electric shower, and I only installed it early on this year. And I can always tell the ground heat by adjusting how much heat extra I need to get hot water. So if it's because it comes directly out of the ground, it does not come anywhere through a tank or anything. It's a direct feed from from the from the pipes outside. So that's I can tell the temperature of the water and of the day, what kind of clothes I'm going to need by how much heat I have to apply to my electric shower. I'm not turning it up at this time of year. Like at the end of the summer, I have to turn it like a tiny little bit to keep the hot water going. No, it's still on the setting that I have for summer. So the ground is not heating up. Now this is not cooling down. It's maintaining a fair amount of heat, which explains why there's so many plants growing ferociously. And almost and certain kinds of plants are not like plants you associate with northern climates, like blackberries are not. The blackberries were weird this year. The apples were weird this year. While some of the tropical plants you have in your garden, like, and you see them around the public parks, are flourishing, like plants associated with the Mediterranean. So there definitely is some kind of heating, warming going on. Now you could say, oh, then that brings the whole global warming thing. But if we're tilting, we could be moving towards the equator slowly. I mean, Europe, Northern Europe are tilted. It's going down like this, very slowly. Now, there is historical precedence for this. We know in the past that the poles change. We always assume the magnetic poles flipped because we could read the changes in polarity down the rock strata, a seam, going back thousands of years. But what if it wasn't the poles shifting? What if the poles were in the right place and it was actually the physical sphere that flipped? What if it was that? You would still get the same readings. Now, I saw a video recently, and I didn't just go, holy shit. I went around and checked it, and it checks out, and it actually adds a tremendous body of evidence. I can't find the fucking thing now, but you'll have to go look for it. A tremendous body of, or sort of morsel of evidence that we could be tilting. And what it was a climatology live satellite storm observation thing of the equators. Now, what you remember from when you were in school, they told you that the storms from the northern hemisphere never cross into the southern hemisphere, and the storms from the southern hemisphere never cross into the northern hemisphere. They don't cross the equators. That's why we have hurricanes in the north and cyclones in the south, or anticyclones in the north. And they never changed. They never crossed. They never crossed the meridian line of the equator. There's two different weather systems on the Earth, north and south. Now, this is very clearly observable through all kinds of like Doppler radar and everything that's on satellites. And this guy showed a satellite system, and it showed in, I think it was 2014, it showed that the equator had moved 150 miles to the north. And I checked everything to make sure he wasn't spoofing. Yes, it was the exact time of day, the same time of year, just, 10 or 12 years later, whatever, it had moved drastically. It wasn't to do with seasonal tilt because it was the same time of year, and it wasn't to do with anything like that. The equator had moved north 150 miles, and the data was there, undeniable, because you could fix a lot of things to hide it, but you couldn't fix weather systems to change all around the globe at one time. So, because the equator had moved 150 miles north, this would suggest that Western Europe has now moved 150 miles south. And this will explain why we just don't get the heavy snowfalls anymore. Why they whipping up the hysteria about climate change and man-made climate change. But there's also other things too. Why are people from these certain hot regions all moving north? It's almost like a kind. The way animals know when something is wrong, like an earthquake. When I was in Sri Lanka, I was told that there was people who were riding elephants down on the beach, and the elephants bolted and ran up into the hills, and ultimately saved the people's lives because they knew the tsunami was coming. And this is just, humans do have these things. They Renfield in these situations too. Now, the biggest danger of tilt is if it happens, it could happen two ways. It could happen slowly, like a centrifuge, right? And then it wouldn't be so bad. But it could go tilt, 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 rump, and not and it wouldn't and the actual model, the dynamic modeling would show that it wouldn't go north south. Basically, where north is would end up going 90 degrees. So Ireland would be ironically in the same latitude as kind of like Mauritius, uh, Sri Lanka, that kind of thing. If it happens slowly, no problem. If it flipped, we're fucked. Now, because of sloshing, sloshing. I took an interest in sloshing because when I was trying to find out if the Apollo hoax was a hoax or real, it's real, and that they did go. One of the things that really piece of evidence that I found amazing was the anti-sloshing buffers inside the Saturn V rockets, because they had to build anti-sloshing chambers inside the fuel tanks. Otherwise, the rocket would be shaken like this as it goes up, because from the fuel sloshing around inside it. And they were, it's like a concentric series of rings that prevented sloshing inside the Saturn V's fuel tanks. So sloshing is what would be the problem. And when we're not talking about tsunami type sloshing. We're talking about waves from the Atlantic, not just covering Florida, low-lying Florida, but going in, probably even covering as far as Colorado. Wouldn't go up to the mountains, of course, but it would go into Colorado. And it does make you wonder about all these billionaires all building these islands and these underground buildings, and all building their spaceships and everything. It does make you wonder, and how long if this is being whispered about among these people. Now, there's no guarantee it's going to slosh. I have friends and I know people who say, "Oh, it's definitely going to slosh," and I've looked at it and it says, not that sounds very, it could be possible, but there's also the possibility that it could be an incremental change. In that case, us here in Western Europe are going to have a beautiful equatorial climate. We'll be able to grow mangoes and stuff like that. Now, doesn't this sound like the propaganda that we were getting from the establishment regarding climate change? Why they're so obsessed with it? What great way to hide the fact that they know the earth is tipping than to make up stories about that it's heating up. Now, the average moron, the average person doesn't look at the stars anymore, especially if they live in cities, and they won't see them at all if they live in 15-minute cities. And like I said, a go-to scope still uses the same geo-positioning software that the U.S. Navy feeds it with from its satellite system. So, I mean, I know this is very tinfoil hat stuff, and it's even for me, this is very tinfoil hat, because I don't normally go there. But I had a friend in Canada who said the sun has definitely changed. He used to bring his kids to school every morning. And he said 10 years ago, on this road where he'd bring the kids in and commute, at a certain time every day, he said he'd be blind. He'd have to wear sunglasses. And at the same time every year, for years, or have the sun was a problem on this highway. It doesn't do that anymore. It's over this side. And he's also noticed that he has growing boxes for growing vegetables, and he says the sun is not hitting them anymore. And comments all over the internet are like this. Oh yeah, now I've actually noticed that too, because in front of me, this window here is a north-facing window, so that's why it doesn't get much sunlight. Okay, so during the day I always need some kind of light in here to read, even in summer. It doesn't get that much sunlight. Now, I've seen sunlight. You see under the architrave of the window here, right? This part here, the part built into the wall, right? On my side here, the sun would rise behind me in summer. I would see the sun shining on this part here on this side. Okay, so the sun would clip it when I first had the house, right? We're talking 20 years ago, right? A few weeks ago, I got up early in the morning and the sun was shining on. You see the wooden wall behind me? The sun was shining on that. I'm like, what the hell? And what I found was that the sun was now shining on this computer screen, and it was acting like a mirror and bouncing it over there. So the sun is now shining in the living room where it only used to shine in summer on the casement, on that, whatever that thing is called, that recess around the window, right? On that side here. Now it's in where I'm looking at you guys now, it's just about there. Okay. That is definitely something that's new. It never happened before. The sun isn't now. I know there's people out there that are cleverer than me, and I probably could do it myself, but you could do a modeling thing to see exactly why. That suggests that the sun is now moving too, it's now rising too far to the northwest. Isn't that right? Yeah, too far. So it was it used to it's moved. It always rises more or less in the east because the latitude here is quite high. Now, another thing I've noticed is people who live at the poles have said that above the poles, sorry, in the poles, in south in just areas like southern Europe, have mentioned that the speed of going from daylight to night seems to be quicker now, and then that makes sense too because as this is what. Here's another thing in Ireland. In say the end of sort of the middle of July, the sun, you'd still have blue skies at midnight. You'd still have blue on the horizon. The sun, when I was a teenager, the sun never really went down in Dublin, and I'm much more north here than Dublin, and so we used to go clubbing. It'd be nighttime. Nighttime would happen about midnight, but you'd come out of the club at 3 a.m. and it was full daylight again. Well, it's not full daylight again at 3 a.m. anymore here in the summer. It's like it takes nearly close to 4. That again shows there's something not right. Something again not right. So this video has really been about my watch time and the Earth tilting space. So we'll call it space and time. So I want to hear from you on this stuff, on this subject, because I get a lot of flack in the sort of the alternative scene for being probably the most conservative person out there. I'm not really. I'm just very cautious about the fact. I don't watch a video and suddenly believe it. I have to check and check and check because I've been caught with my knickers down a few times, like 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago. So yeah, tell me if you've experienced the sun rising in a different place, and do you have any links, or just name the sites, a site, but don't name a site. Don't give me a fucking 24-hour Rumble video that runs for 9 hours. If there's quick decent video, say there's this on Rumble, it's 7 minutes long, there's this on YouTube, it's 9 minutes long, and I'll go look at it. But don't, the truthers love 4-hour videos on Rumble, 8-hour videos on Odyssey. No, that's brainwashing. That's you won't you could make Sammy Davis Jr. a white SS officer in someone's mind if you had 8 hours on Odyssey to change it. No, just give me something quick and fast. Don't give me Ghetto Rich. Like Ghetto Rich. Ghetto Rich when I was growing up was fellas in Ballymun. If they had £100, they would take 2 20s and put it at the front of the wallet and the back of the wallet, and then they would get £61 notes and they would pile it in between. So when they opened their wallet up, they'd look like they were loaded. It was full of 62 20s, but it wasn't. That was Ghetto Rich. And so I don't want, I don't want. That's what I call those videos on those 4 hour, 6 hour videos on Rumble that just meander about this. They say the same thing over again. They're ghetto rich. A point can be made very quickly. Wham bam, thank you, man. And it doesn't need hours and hours of mantras being repeated like you get in the flat earth videos. So let me know about this. This is cool. This is a cool discussion thing, and let's see what's happening. Take care.